Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück zu Let's Play Corpse Party. In der letzten Folge bin ich hier gestorben. Ich habe ja 2 Speicherpunkte. Ich werde jetzt erstmal hier versuchen, hier auszubrechen. Mal schauen, ob ich das überleben werde. Staying in one place for too long seemed like it would be inviting trouble, so I took a deep breath and reluctantly crawled out as quietly as I could. But almost immediately, I felt something. Something long and thin had struck me in the back of my head. Or perhaps struck is the right word. There was a little force behind it, but it wasn't a hard slam. More like someone trying to get my attention. I knew I wouldn't like what I was going to see, but I had to face whatever it was, so I turned around. Oh God! And there, looming over me, was... A figure was peering down at me from above the podium, with one emaciated wishbone-like finger extended toward my face. I recognized this person instantly, no doubt about it. This was... the strange old woman who'd supposedly passed away earlier. I was scared out of my mind. I tumbled the rest of the way out from under the podium and shot to my feet. A ghost. There really was a ghost in this school. My breathing was ragged and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Plowing through all the desks in my way, I ran as fast as I could toward the classroom door. But that was as far as I could go. There, in the open doorway, was the same old woman emitting a bluish-white glow. This was the source of the light I'd seen through the window earlier. But how in the world did she get to the door before I did? Entschuldigung, du begegnest gerade im Geist. I felt like I was starting to hyperventilate and tried as best as I could to calm my breathing as my eyes darted about the room. I needed to get out of here now, to get as far away from this place as I possibly could. I bit my lip and continued scanning the room. I didn't have time to think carefully about it. I just had to grab something and hope for the best. There were 2 choices and I had to pick one of the impulse before it was too late. So, das heißt, hier müssen wir natürlich hier auch nochmal speichern. Broom bag of salt. Macht Sinn bei Geistern, glaube ich. I'd heard that salt was used in purification rituals, so it seemed like a natural choice. I placed the salt in my pocket as a sort of protective charm. When I looked over, the spirit of the old woman was holding out her hand from the other side of the doorframe. She really was trying to catch me. I wasn't just being paranoid. She was going to kill me and turn me into a ghost like her. I was convinced this had to be Yoshi, the teacher from that urban legend. Nur dann frage ich mich immer noch, wie zur Hölle die rausgekommen ist. Bracing myself, I darted toward the door at the back of the end of the classroom. There wasn't a moment to lose. If I didn't act fast, I probably wouldn't be able to act at all. I threw the door open and just began running at top speed, hoping to escape behind the spirit's back. Unsurprisingly, trying to outrun a ghost proved to be a fruitless endeavor. The spirit saw me and moved at breakneck speed to intercept. I thrust my hand into my pocket and withdrew the bag of salt, then threw the entire thing directly at the old woman's face. I ran down the hall as fast as my legs could carry me, briefly glancing over my shoulder after a moment to confirm that the spirit was still writhing. I just kept on running down the dark hallway with nothing but adrenaline and mortal fear to keep me going. I reached the stairwell at the end of the hall and made a mad dash toward ground level, determined to get out of this building alive. Finally, still moving at top speed, I reached the window door leading outside. Oh, bitte sag, dass die Tür offen ist. Luckily, the male villain spirit hadn't caught up to me yet. It actually seems like I might be able to escape. I might actually survive this. Nee, raus. I grabbed the handle and tried pulling it. Oh, fickt euch! Oh mein Gott. Auch hier wieder speichern. I have to, was? Or maybe I could hide somewhere and throw Yoshi off my trail. I had no particular destination in my mind. My only thought was anywhere but here. After maybe 30 seconds, I found myself in the second floor hallway. There was an outside corridor connecting the two buildings of the school there, and it was the first alternate escape route that came to my mind. Naturally, it was walled off from the outside for safety purposes, but the wall wasn't so big that I could scale it in a pinch. I didn't really want to jump from the second floor out of the school, but I had to. But if I had to, I was confident that I'd at least survive the fall with minimal injury. Das ist gut, das klingt sehr gut. I climbed the wall faster than I thought possible and dropped down to the narrow ledge on the other side. It was just wide enough to sit down. My back was to the hallway, but the location should have been completely hidden from anyone inside the school. I looked down at the muddy ground below me. I really couldn't see much though. The outside was completely dark. It was so dark that it felt almost like the whole world had been trapped in a black veil. I opened the pen case in my pocket and pulled out the pencil I received from Tsukasa. Was I really treating this stubby little pencil as a protective charm? Tsukasa said it would guarantee success on my test, not ward off evil spirits. Still, it was better than nothing. I clutched it tightly in my hands and prayed. I whispered the words so quietly that I might as well have been mouthing them, but that seemed to be all the opening the damned spirit needed. Oh, fuck. I sensed a presence on the ledge with me and was so startled that I almost fell from my perch. However, I could only sense her there, I didn't actually see her, and thought for one brief moment that maybe I was letting my imagination run wild. But then I felt the horrible sensation of something coiling itself around my arm. Ugh! Jetzt bin ich verwirrt, das... And before I knew it, a tall shadow figure had half emerged from the wall behind me, and she had me in her grasp. There wasn't much more to her than an indistinct flickering silhouette, but I could clearly see she had a broken neck. What? Was this a different apparition? Das ist die Mutter von Sachiko nämlich hier. Und nicht die alte Frau. Her scraggly root-like fingers were squeezing my arm with tremendous force, pushing aside muscle and tissue and pressing right on the bone. I was shaking hysterically and tears were streaming down my face. I was absolutely convinced that I was going to die here. Ja, das ist die Mama von Sachiko. I could offer no resistance. She was too strong. All I could do was plead with her. I felt like my arm would snap in two at any moment. She wasn't just grabbing, but twisting as well. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I couldn't think about anything else. Stopping it had become my first and only priority. I struggled violently against the spirit's grip, ultimately breaking free from throwing my body off the wall toward the unseen earth below. In the face of death, everything really does seem to slow down. I'd read somewhere that this is because the brain is sending out all kinds of distress signals or something. Slow motion or not, though, I was fully aware of my surroundings. I was cascading through the air just outside my school building. Wow, okay. Auch hier nochmal speichern. Versuchen wir mal lieber das. I was pretty sure this fall would kill me. With a controlled jump, I might have been able to survive, but I was tumbling like a rag doll. I was a goner. I couldn't even remember what you were supposed to do in a situation like this. Try to flip over? Brace for impact? Wer ist eine Katze, muss sich umdrehen. Mia, mia. In one last ditch attempt at survival, I stretched out both arms. Maybe somebody would be waiting there to grab them. Maybe somebody would save me. And somebody actually did. I honestly wasn't expecting that. I really thought there was no hope. But then, at the last second, I was yanked to safety. Nee.
大丈夫か？つかめ、俺の腕。
I held onto his arms with all my weight, and against seemingly impossible odds, I was pulled in. My life was saved. This was like a scene out of some anime. It shouldn't have happened. It was too convenient, but I wasn't about to complain. Voll cheesy. Was macht der hier?
よく頑張ったな。
どうして司くん。
今はしのごの言ってる場合じゃない。逃げるぞ。
Tsukasa was still holding onto me tightly after coming to my rescue. He took off down the hall, back into the heart of the school, with me in tow.
ちくしょう、なんだよさっきのは。俺は夢でも見てるのか。
He practically spit these words as he continued running.
どうしてここに司くんが。
I tried to match his gait, and once we were a bit more in sync, I looked up at his face. He was fast. After we'd reached the end of the hall, he suddenly veered into the last classroom before the stairway, pulling me in with him.
大丈夫。私はもう一人で歩けるから。
ああ、悪い。
I moved away from Tsukasa and almost immediately spilled onto the ground like a house of cards.
おい、大丈夫じゃないじゃん。
そうだけど、でもすぐに。
無理すんなよ。
Tsukasa grabbed my arm to help me up. Unfortunately, it was the arm Yoshi has been twisting.
悪い。やっぱり腕怪我してるのか。
よくわかんない。でもすっごく痛いよ。焼けるみたい。
I draped my other hand over the sore spot, where I assumed there was probably one hell of a bruise. I started rubbing gently, but it didn't help at all.
そうか。じゃあ保健室ですぐに手当てした方がいいna.
ね。
でもそしたらまた。
あいつが来るって。
Ja. Abgesehen davon, genau der Geist ist ja eben dort. Just thinking about going back out there and facing Yoshi made me shudder. I couldn't believe he was even entertaining the idea.
心配すんな。もし仮にあいつが来ても、俺が絶対お前を守ってやるから。
Nee, das ist trotzdem zu unsicher. Es sei denn, er ist selber ein Geist, aber das glaube ich nicht. Tsukasas gentle reassurance actually made me forget the pain in my arm for a moment. I had to stop myself from blushing, or try to, at any rate.
怪我は一刻も早く手当てした方がいいって。まあどうせ先生なんかいないだろうけど、応急手当てくらいなら俺にだってできる。
Warum denkt man denn an sowas in so einer Situation? Warum denkt man nicht daran, als erstes hier irgendwie zu verschwinden?
よし、行くぞ。
Tsukasa offered me his hand, and I graciously took it, squeezing it tightly as he led me back out into the hallway.
司くんの手あったかい。
Despite the fact that nothing had really changed, I was still in just as much danger as I had been. The paralyzing fear I'd been feeling was gone. If it were just me, I would have never been able to do this. I would have frozen up, but with Tsukasa leading the way, I felt like I could do anything.
シシド、少し走るけど大丈夫か？
With my blessing, Tsukasa upped his pace significantly.
もうあいつが出てきませんように。
I prayed silently for smooth sailing as I followed Tsukasa's lead.
このまま司くんと一緒にいられれば。
I gently squeezed his hand again, as if to reassure myself that he was still with me. I was starting to think maybe Yoshi was gone, maybe we'd thwarted her. But of course, just as I was thinking that, she made her presence known again. Oh, die Sounds sind so böse.
なんだってんだ。出てこい。
An unearthly voice reverberated through the dark corridor. I immediately drew myself into Tsukasa's bag.
もっと連れてこい。
Oh. Wobei, ganz ehrlich, ich finde, das sieht so ein bisschen aus, als hätten sie einfach die Figur aus dem Manga ausgeschnitten und da reingeklebt. In das Spiel quasi. Over Tsukasas shoulder, I saw the same shadow-like spirit from before. I must have been waiting here to ambush us.
大丈夫。落ち着け。
The ghost was moaning and wavering before us. We'd never been able to get past it.
私のために何でもしてくれる。
おい、シシド。 俺があいつを引きつけるから、その隙に走って逃げろ。
やだよ、一緒に逃げて。
俺には秘密兵器があるのさ。
Das ist ein Bleistift.
俺のばあさんからもらった形見のお守り。さっきあいつにこれを向けたら少し割り上がった。
形見のお守り？
あ
あ。でも司くんやっぱり危険。
Und bestimmt hat er gar keinen und will sie nur retten.
まあ、なんとかなるだろう。
そんな。待ちなさい。
We really didn't have time to be arguing. It was closing in fast, and as it did, I noticed the spirit's figure had become more defined. She was a tall young woman with her head turned sideways at a 90-degree angle. The tale of Yoshi suggests she fell down a flight of stairs, so a broken neck would certainly fit.
早く走れ!
He gave my back a shove to get me started, and with no time to object, I unconsciously obliqued. Tsukasa ran too, darting ahead of me for a few short moments.
おい、化け物! こっちだ!
待ちなさい!
Tsukasa ran as close as he possibly could to get Yoshi's attention, then turned tail and began sprinting off in the opposite direction.
こっちだぞ! 化け物!
Amazingly, it worked. The spirit began chasing Tsukasa, leaving me completely unobstructed.
どうしよう。私、このまま一人逃げてもいいの?
I was torn. On the one hand, I knew this was my best chance, but I couldn't help worrying about what would happen to Tsukasa if his charm failed. I stopped for a moment and glanced over my shoulder. He was still running, and the shadowy figure was still in hot pursuit.
司くん、お守り出して！危ないよ！
いいから、行けって！お前が逃げ切ったのを確認したら、俺も逃げるからさ！
I still can't believe I fell for it, but this was right about when I realized the truth. Tsukasa had no protective charm. He just made that up so I wouldn't object too strongly to him serving as decoy while I got away.
やっぱりダメ!
I stopped in my tracks and shouted out at the top of my lungs.
待ちなさい! ヨシエ先生!
I wasn't sure exactly what I was getting myself into, but I had to do something, and calling the spirit's name definitely seemed to have an effect.
あなたの名前、知ってるわよ!
おい、シスター!
All at once, the black figure was facing me, though I never saw her turn around. She was flying toward me now, ignoring Tsukasa. I repeated this like a sutra and stuck one hand into my pocket, grasping tightly onto the one and only item I'd stashed there.
お前は私を知っているのか? 私には本当にお守りがある.
Tsukasa's care, his effort, his beliefs, they were all packed into this pencil. When you get right down to it, that's what a charm is, right? I squeezed the nubby little thing in my pocket, mentally preparing myself for the confrontation ahead. The confrontation I'd impulsively initiated.
シスター! 逃げろ!
逃げない! 私は逃げないわ! 神様、どうかお願い! 助けて!
I closed my eyes, lifted my hand from my pocket and brandished Tsukasa's pencil intently. The gauntlet had been thrown. I was putting a lot of faith into this, and I really hoped I hadn't made a mistake in doing so.
私は獅子の結！この学校で先生を目指しているわ!
I opened my eyes to find that the shadowy spirit, Yoshi, had stopped dead in her tracks. Didn't it work? Was Tsukasa's pencil keeping this vengeful soul at bay? Did it work?
私の代わりはいらない。死ね。
Suddenly, I was whisked off my feet and slammed against the ceiling. I could see him down below. He was staring up at me and desperately leaping. He was trying to catch me, I suppose, even though he knew he'd never reach. I called out to him over and over again in my mind. If he could get away, if he could survive this ordeal, then it would all have been worth. Yoshi was drawing near, and I was helplessly pinned to the ceiling. I had no chance at all. There was no doubt in my mind that my life was over. I clung to the relief I felt at Tsukasa's safety. It was the only thing keeping me from losing my head entirely. Then, all at once, the situation took a complete 180. It was like a miracle. What? Before I had any idea what was happening, I found myself bathed in a gentle light. Okay. It was the old woman who had collapsed in front of my house. She was standing down below me, enveloped in a warm glow. The black shadow lunged toward her. Then there was a horrific noise, and the old woman was gone. And just like that, I fell to the ground. Doc, whatever Yoshi had done to me, the old woman must have nullified it. That must have been why she came to me this morning, and why she had come again now. I felt like I was going to faint. Tsukasa ran to my side and gently scooped me off the ground into his arms. Yoshi's spirit was gone. She'd vanished along with the light. Around us now, the only sound was the pitter-patter of raindrops off the school roof.
Oi! Shizuto! Shizuto!
I'd suffered quite a bump on the head from my fall and was disoriented, but I still had enough sense to put my arms around Tsukasa's neck.
Baga! Nigero tte itta no ni!
I wanted to protect you. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, is what I wanted to say. But instead, I just passed out in his arms. Oje, oje. Und wie es weitergeht, das erst in der nächsten Folge. Ich muss sagen, ich fand das Ganze jetzt dezent cheesy, aber auch schön. Eigentlich ist es ganz schön, wenn man bedenkt. Wobei, wisst ihr, was ich mich gerade frage? Ganz ehrlich, wäre ich an dieser Schule gewesen, hätte genau das erlebt. Ich hätte mich niemals dazu entschlossen, an dieser Schule zu unterrichten. Ich weiß nicht. Also selbst wenn ich vielleicht glauben würde, dass dann alles vorbei sei, ne, das könnte man ja annehmen. Ne. Nach all dem hätte ich viel zu große Angst davor, glaube ich. Oder wie seht ihr das? Würdet ihr noch weiterhin in der Schule arbeiten wollen oder nicht? Aber gut, Leute, das war's für heute. Ich denke mal, in der nächsten Folge werden wir den Rest dieses Kapitels machen und werden danach auch in das nächste Kapitel springen, das im Übrigen einen komplett neuen Charakter enthalten wird. Von daher bleibt dran. Ich denke, es wird sehr, sehr interessant. Und ja, bis zur nächsten Folge.